Souls games, or Soulslikes, or Soulsbornes, whatever you want to call them. This subgenre has exploded in popularity in recent years. In addition to the massive success of the Dark Souls games, FromSoftware's release of Elden Ring shattered previous sales records in a matter of weeks. This encouraged other developers to make Soulslikes of their own, and a lot of upcoming releases in this new genre look pretty interesting. But have you ever wondered what was the very first Souls-like game? Of course, to find our answer, we need to cover what exactly defines this genre. The criteria isn't set in stone, but here are the features that I personally think are the most important. To start off our list, Souls-likes are usually third-person action RPGs with an explorable, interconnected map, which includes checkpoints such as bonfires or lanterns where you can heal, level up, warp, and respawn at. Items and upgrades can be bought with something like souls or runes, which are lost on death but can be found again close to where you died. Actions such as blocking, attacking, and rolling can be done at the cost of stamina, and boss fights are usually what mark the player's progression. They're also known for being somewhat unforgiving.
My ears burn!
But you can use competitive or cooperative multiplayer to help increase or decrease the difficulty as you please. Custom builds and stats are pretty standard, along with some aspects of your inventory like right and left weapon slots, spells, and healing items that take some time to consume. Finally, there's the implicit story that's partially told through obscure item descriptions and environments, which is half the reason why channels like mine even exist. Alright, with this definition, let's begin our search for the first Souls-like. While some think that Dark Souls was FromSoftware's earliest game with these features, Demon Souls actually released 2 years before it in 2009. Demon Souls is a standalone title, and unless you buy into some of the crazier theories, the later Souls games are only connected by nature of being spiritual successors. Despite this, every single one of the traits we described is found to some degree in Demon Souls, and it's all thanks to its rocky development that some of these features were even made possible. Since the development team couldn't create a compelling prototype, one of FromSoftware's coders named Hidetaka Miyazaki convinced the company to let him direct the project, as its fantasy setting caught his attention. Miyazaki then added gameplay mechanics that were almost unheard of at the time. While many companies were trying to create games with a wider appeal, Demon Souls instead has mechanics like making the game increasingly difficult when the player dies, and the ability to join other players' worlds as a friendly blue phantom or an enemy black phantom was an incredibly unique idea. According to Miyazaki, summoning was inspired by a time when his car got stuck on a snowy hill. But, with the help of other cars pushing each other by the bumper, everyone eventually made it up the hill and got to drive home safely. And I like to imagine that black phantoms were inspired by drunk drivers. But before Demon Souls, there was another game that released over 8 years earlier that could be classified as a Souls-like. On this game's Steam page, it's described as a hardcore fantasy action-adventure that pioneered the Soulsborne genre. This game's title is Severance: Blade of Darkness, or just Blade of Darkness in the North American version. The term severance comes from how you can slice off the body parts of enemies and then use them as makeshift weapons. The player picks one of 4 characters, hunts down 6 magical runes, empowers a sacred weapon, and kills an ancient demon. While a few of its Souls parallels are altered or just missing entirely, it's still pretty shocking how many features it checks off. It's a third-person action RPG with a map that was designed for exploration. The stamina system is almost identical to the Souls games, complete with combat actions like blocking, attacking, and rolling. There are a ton of bosses, and the difficulty is definitely comparable to other games in this genre. You can't create custom builds, but your choice of character is kind of like your choice of class in Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and Elden Ring. Also, the inventory system should be familiar with things like left and right-handed equipment, and the inclusion of consumable healing potions. Bonfires and souls are notably missing, but at least there's still an experience system for leveling up. And just look at how similar the intro cutscene is in this game compared to Dark Souls. So, is Blade of Darkness the first Souls-like game? By some definitions, yeah. But keep in mind that it never released in Japan, where FromSoftware is located, and combined with its relative obscurity, it might not have had any significant influence on the future of Souls-likes. Instead, there's another pair of games released by Capcom that same year that fundamentally shaped the genre: Devil May Cry, where you play as the stylish demon hunter Dante, and Onimusha Warlords, where you play as Samanosuke, a samurai that fights demons by using powerful magical artifacts. It's pretty funny that every game we've looked at so far is about fighting demons, Both of these are third-person action games with decently explorable worlds, and Devil May Cry's Malay Island feels like it's right out of a Souls game. There's no stamina bar, but a lot of Souls-like combat actions are still present, such as Onimusha's parry system, and Devil May Cry's dodge rolls that would be added in later entries. For their bonfire parallels, Devil May Cry has goddess statues, and Onimusha has magic mirrors where you can save and spend souls to upgrade equipment. And yes, the resources that enemies drop in Onimusha are actually called souls, I did not make that up. A huge number of bosses help contribute to the overall difficulty, and the American release of Devil May Cry goes one step further by decreasing the damage you deal while increasing the damage dealt by enemies. I don't know why they did this. And for the last points, they both include an inventory of different weapons and consumables, and builds can be created by what abilities you upgrade first. So, while Blade of Darkness released in February of 2001, Onimusha Warlords released 1 month before it in January, making this the real first Souls-like in history. Although, during an interview with Miyazaki, there's another game that he cites as a textbook for 3D action. A game from a series that was so monumental that he feels unworthy of the comparison between it and Dark Souls. We'll need to look back at the 90s for this one. Sorry, I think I'm coming down with something. Anyways, this game is The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Okay, let me explain my argument for why this game counts. In terms of its influence, Ocarina of Time's spectacular bosses, lock-on system, equipment slots for both weapons and consumables, and dodge rolling are all mechanics that later became central to the action game genre. Of course, this game didn't invent all of these features, but its massive success helped show how well these all work together. And other Souls-like traits such as its open world, dark story, and surprisingly difficult combat scenarios further strengthen the parallels. So we can pretty safely define this as one of the earliest and most important Souls-like games ever. But was it the first? Well, no, which can be proven by looking back to FromSoftware's first game ever, King's Field. While the first King's Field game was never published outside of Japan, its sequels did eventually make it to the West, where they just passed King's Field 2 off as the first entry of the series. The English voice acting was also pretty hilarious.
He seemed to be listening to something coming from the very light itself.
Brightly does the fire of light burn within your heart, Austin Lyle Forrester.
I'm sure you could guess at this point, but King's Field involves yet another story about a hero obtaining a legendary weapon to slay a demonic threat. Let's bring out the list. Action RPG? Check, just in first person this time. Explorable world? Yep, though it's pretty easy to get lost without any sort of map. Stamina is represented by your attacks being weaker if used too quickly. While there weren't any souls, you still leveled up with experience, and crosses as save points were like an early form of bonfires. The inventory system is there, and while there's only one boss, just look at how ridiculous the first regular enemy of the game is. It's also worth noting that King's Field has been referenced several times in FromSoftware's other series, but even when considering all this, many people still say that the first Souls-like game is Ultima Underworld, the Stygian Abyss. Okay, this game is actually really cool. It's all about exploring the 8 increasingly dangerous floors of the Abyss, with completely non-linear progression and absurd attention to detail. I think this is the first game to ever be recognized as a 3D action RPG, and its impact in gaming has probably never been matched by anything else since its release. I'm sure you're sick of me just listing off features, so I'll just show them on screen over here. If you count King's Field as a Souls-like, then this game definitely also counts, since it checks off even more points on the list. Both games do violate the requirement of a third-person view, but if we're willing to give up the camera perspective, who's to say that Souls-likes have to even be 3D? In fact, there's another genre that consists mostly of 2D platformers, yet it shares so much with Souls games that it could be considered its own subgenre. We'll have to go all the way back to the 80s to find the first of these.
I really am not feeling too good.
Well, you might have already guessed it, but I'm talking about Metroidvanias. Much like the term Souls-like and roguelike, this genre is named after the games that help define it, which are, in this case, the Metroid and Castlevania series. Both series have included explorable maps, boss-based progression, and high difficulty since the start. And while they relied on a passcode system to save the player's progress, their sequels would implement more intuitive save rooms. Castlevania Symphony of the Night in particular included dodging, blocking, a leveling system, and an inventory for items and weapons. So if all Metroidvanias fit our Souls-like criteria, that would make Metroid the first of its kind, being released 1 month before Castlevania in August of 1986. Well, this would be the first if Dragon Slayer didn't include all of this except the ability to save in 1984. Sure, the only combat actions are move and attack, you could only hold one item at a time, and there's only one boss.
Well, at least I still have my personality.
But this has to count, right? Although Akalabith, World of Doom, which was based off of J.R.R. Tolkien's work, did all of this and had build customization back in 1980, only excluding the real-time combat in exchange for turn-based fights. And actually, the game D&D did this all 5 years prior in 1975. D&D is obviously based on Dungeons & Dragons, the role-playing board game that released only 1 year before it. With how much influence this game ended up having, imagine if it was based on something like Star Trek instead, and science fiction became the most common setting for RPGs instead of fantasy. Just something to think about. Alright, I've been trailing on for long enough, so let's finally look at the actual first Souls-like game in history. Hunt the Wumpus, 1973. The premise of this game is simple. The player navigates through a cave system, trying to find and kill a creature called the Wumpus without being caught and eaten. Hunt the Wumpus was text-based and had to be printed on a piece of paper, so keep in mind that all of these visuals are just a mock-up. The developer, Gregory Yob, thought of this game after seeing the prototypes for 3 other monster hunting games titled Snark, Hurkle, and Mugwump. None of these monsters had an official appearance, but creatures with the same names would show up in other forms of media, though it's not clear if any of these were direct references. The Wumpus was only ever described as a large, heavy creature with suckers on its feet, though an unofficial remake by Texas Instruments depicts it to look like this. Unlike Snark, Hurkle, and Mugwump's 10x10 grid, Gregory Yob chose to create Hunt the Wumpus' map in the shape of a squashed dodecahedron. Each room can contain the Wumpus, an instant kill pit, or a super bat that carries the player off to a random location. And you'll be told if any of these are by an adjacent cave. The player can shoot a crooked arrow in a custom path through up to 5 rooms, and it is possible to shoot yourself for a game over. Hunt the Wumpus is especially unique in that it was the first game to put the player in the protagonist's shoes, so they can roleplay as someone navigating the cave's connections. RPG elements, explorable caves, bonfire warping, bosses? Yeah, that counts. Unforgiving mechanics, 5 arrows make up your inventory, and finally, with no clear description of the Wumpus, its implicit threat brings us to 7 core features of Souls-like games. Gregory Yob is the true creator of the Souls-like genre, and to preserve his mind, this man was cryonically frozen in 2005 in the hopes that he could be thawed out and revived in the distant future. As soon as that happens, I fully expect FromSoftware to appoint him as the new head of the company. Alright, in all seriousness, the definition of a Souls-like isn't clear, but personally, I think anything past this line is a bit of a stretch. I do still think it's cool to see how these games all inspired each other, just like how this video was inspired by these YouTubers. You should check them out if you've never watched them before, even if this video is mostly a joke. That part about the Wumpus guy being frozen was real though.